Do you need tips on how to play the middle game? Well, this is your video. I already released a video on the middle game principles, but I wanted to make it very concrete, and I will show you the middle game principles alongside a game I've played over the board in a tournament I've won, and this was one of the key games, and I opened with the move d4. My opponent played the move knight to f6. And in the opening you have to remember after c4 that there's 3 golden rules you have to adhere to. Pawn in the center, develop your pieces, like my opponent maybe will do, and also make sure to bring your king to safety. I already have a pawn in the center, next I need to develop, but my opponent plays a move c5. This is a fair option because it also attacks the center. And now I need to make a decision. Will I give up my center, maybe then e5, or will I push the pawn? I like to push the pawn and keep a pawn in the center. But it is maybe a bit harder to protect this pawn because the knight also attacks the e4 square. b5, immediately attacking the pawn defending my central pawn. So I need to make a choice again. Here I like to take the pawn because it's a gambit, right? He gives away a pawn. But it's hard to defend this pawn. But there's a good line here because after a6, trying to get rid of another pawn, if I were to take, then the black bishop develops. And look at this. Black has already 2 pieces developed. The knight will likely also develop quite fast after a move like d6. And for me it's pretty hard to push this pawn. And then probably I cannot castle anymore because he will take my bishop. So there's a lot of compensation for black in this position. So that's why I like not to take here, but to play the move e3. Opening up the diagonal for the bishop. So if we were ever take, then I will take back with my bishop. And also I'm able to develop in this way later. So instead of the extra pawn, I choose for development here. Now the move g6, and black wants to develop as well. He also needs to adhere to the golden rules, and here knight to c3, protecting both pawns and making it easy for me to develop even further. Bishop g7, knight to f3. And yeah, I should continue developing, right? Because there's still 2 moves to go before I can castle my king. Castles. So you see that my opponent already has castled and next can think about how to develop the rest, the queen side of the position. Here I try to protect the extra pawn, right? So I give up a move in the opening where I could also try to develop in order to protect this pawn and keep the pawn on the board. And for me, what is really important, and you will see it later as well, I want to delay the move with the bishop because I prefer to play my bishop only when my opponent decides to take, like this. But then I need to make sure that my opponent will take here at some point. So that's the game I'm in at the moment. Developing the pawn, bishop b7 also would have been a good move. And here I play the move e4, protecting my central pawn and also making room for the bishop to develop even further. But yeah, I'm delaying my development a bit. Still, e4 is the best move and I know these positions. And like I said, I only want to develop this bishop when I can also take here on b5. So first I would like to develop my black squared bishop. Bishop b7. And it is quite interesting, right? Because the bishop is eyeing on my 2 center pawns. Bishop to d2. Developing the bishop and also connecting the queen to the rook. So now it's also an option to take back like this, right? Because my rook is now protected. This could be an option now as well. But that's not what my opponent played. My opponent played the move e6, attacking my center. And now I need to make a choice. Will I wait and have my opponent take here? Or, for example, after bishop e3, takes, but this is now a very weak pawn and the rook will come to the e file as well. So black has great compensation for the pawn. Instead, I took here and my opponent takes back. And now one of the first principles of the middle game is to look at weaknesses and attack your weaknesses. Here my opponent created a weakness with the a2 to g8 diagonal, right? If I would get my bishop and my queen on this diagonal with the king behind the pawn, it's very strong. So this is something I'm spotting right now and this is what I'm playing for now. At the same time, I am to move. And I ideally would like to take back this pawn with my bishop, but my opponent didn't take yet and I need to develop now, so I play the move bishop to d3. Because I want to finish my development as soon as possible, castle, bring my king to safety and finish the 3 golden rules of the opening. Now my opponent takes, so as I would like to take when my time is right, my opponent only takes his pawn when I move the bishop and I lose a tempo if I were to take with the bishop, but I take back with the pawn. And look at this pawn is a runner already. And this bishop helps with the protection of the e4 pawn. And now to d7, a good developing move. Look at these rooks, they are eyeing each other, and this is another principle of the middle game. The rooks want to be on the open file. If I were to take here, I give up my open file, and the queen will enter the open file. This is something I ideally do not want to have, and I ideally would prefer, let's make a random move, that my opponent takes, and that I can take back on my terms. Perhaps in this position is not the best option, but just to show you, because now my queen is on the open file, right? So I castle here. Here my opponent could have taken my rook, but then I would simply take back and get this nice file. But here the knight will come in. And that's why this would have been a good move, because if I take, then this is very weak. So the queen is eyeing on the two bishops. So that's why in this particular moment, it would have been good for black to actually take my rook. But black didn't and went here to e7 with the queen. Now I played my queen out of the way, so my rooks are connected in case my opponent ever takes. I will take back with my rook. And I already have a great position. I am plus 1.5 at this moment. My pieces are centralized, also a middle game principle. Make sure that your pieces are centralized. My rooks are connected, very important, are on an open file. So I'm good to go. I'm ready for the next phase, and that's to play the middle game and actually play on the e6 pawn, the weakness of my opponent. And my opponent allowed to have a weakness. Knight to g4, trying to go to this square, trying to blockade and maybe also exchange my bishop. But now I see a very forcing sequence. Rook takes a8, the best move in the position. And if my opponent were to take back with the rook, well, then I have bishop c4, and it's very difficult to protect this pawn. For example, after d5, well, you cannot really take back here because your queen is hanging, right? And if you take, then I can simply take again, and you cannot take, right? So instead, my opponent takes back with the bishop, making sure that the bishop is still on this great diagonal, but it's also a bit in the corner, right? So maybe I want to target it, but I find another way to attack the e6 square, right? Remember, this is the weakness I'm playing on. Knight here, I attack this knight, so my opponent needs to react. Goes there, I already wanted to go to this square, and now I play the move bishop to c4. Now bishop b1 would have been a good move, trying to get my bishop on this diagonal via a2. But I thought I was a bit slow, so I played the bishop to c4. I knew that I would give up the bishop, but after takes, I still have a lot of pressure on this pawn with my knight, which is defended by my bishop, a very important detail. So here black is on the defense. Rook to e8. Here the move d5 is not really working, because after takes and knight here, I go back, I pin the pawn to the queen, and after takes, I can simply take this pawn, and this is a better position for me, +2. So my opponent goes rook to e8, and here I find the best move in the position, which is rook to a1, attacking this bishop. And now the rook needs to defend the bishop and also help in supporting the defense of the e6 pawn. Right? I continuously, with every move, I play against this pawn. For example, a random move, king h8, I can simply take, and in the end the bishop falls, right? So this is important to remember. But my opponent plays knight to b6, and I retreat the queen. By the way, taking here doesn't really work, because I thought in the end I would have had this move. And now I attack both the knight and the bishop. So d5 is the right move. But if I take, then the rook defends the knight. And after bishop takes d5, I can take here. But then rook e2 is a strong move. And this is somewhat equal. So that's why I played queen to e2. And the game goes on. I'm still better in this position. Bishop to b7, and now I bring in the rook, and I know that next the rook will go to a8, but I trade, and my calculation was that I'm way more active. I still have the extra pawn, right? My knight is very well, and I can bring the queen into the game. And I still have this weakness to play for. Queen to g4, attacking the pawn once more. My opponent probably is already completely done with me, constantly attacking this e6 pawn. Bishop to c8, still defending, and now I bring my queen to h3. Threaten to give a check here, right? So my opponent needs to act. So almost every move I make is a forcing move, and my opponent needs to react on me, right? And that's what you want to do. And my opponent reacts with the move h5. Here, I should have played queen to d3, which is strong because now the g6 pawn is super weak. And at some point I threatened to play the move e5. But I was in time pressure like my opponent and I played the move queen to f3. Not the best move, because here knight to b6 is a cracker of a move. Great move, because this knight will come here and here. And I don't want to allow it. And I made up my mind that I should have gone queen to d3 in the previous move. And I do it right away. I admit that I was wrong and I still make the move. And it's still the best move in the position. I realized it just on time. And here the move bishop to d4. But now I have a stunning move. And it's the same as I just explained. The g6 pawn is weak. And therefore I play the move e5. Attacking his center. He cannot allow me to take here. For example, takes. Then I will simply take here. And queen in between. I will simply take this pawn. And this is +6 for me. Instead, my opponent brings his king forward. But now I take the d6 pawn. And these pawns are now separated. They're not connected anymore. So before he had quite a nice center setup here, right? At some point he could break maybe. But I was just in time to discombobulate his pieces. And now knight e4, attacking the queen. And yes, my pawn is hanging, but first your queen is hanging, right? And this, by the way, is not a move. If you saw that my queen is not protected, loose pieces drop off most of the time, because here I would take back with the knight and I still defend my queen. So queen to e7, but now do you see an amazing move? This pawn is weak, right? I could choose to defend it, but that is quite slow. Instead, can I get rid of this weak b pawn with an attacking move? Yes, b4, attacking the defender of the bishop. If takes, then it's a check. And I win both the bishop and later also the knight. So my opponent couldn't take and plays the move e5, supporting the bishop. But here I take the pawn, getting rid of my weaker b pawn. So this pawn would have loved to go here also at some point, but he doesn't have the time. Knight to d5, and I have two best pawns now. Queen to c4, attacking the knight. Maybe at some point I will come in here, and the knight goes back. Still, my opponent needs to take care of this square. Look at my pieces and the coordination. The knights defend each other. The knight defends the bishop, right? Only my queen is not defended, and my queen is already behind my passed pawn. Great, so if you have a passer, you want to have your pieces behind it. Bishop to c3. Here I'm up. I also have a video on attacking principles, and if you're up, then you want to trade pieces. Here my opponent takes the knight first, I take back, and here after queen h4 my opponent does get some play, right? The queen gets a bit annoying and eyeing on the f2 square. I get back with my queen, protecting the knight which was under attack and also protecting the f2 square. And if takes, I can simply take back with the knight, right? Everything protects each other. My pieces are coordinated very well. Bishop to g4, attacking my queen. Queen e1, because there's also, not right now, but at some point maybe some back rank stuff looming, right? Because my pawns are still here. Bishop to f5, attacking my knight, and now it's attacked twice, and I cannot defend it because it's pinned here. So what do? Knight to d6, attacking the bishop, and also maybe supporting this pawn going forward as well. The bishop goes back, and here c6 would have been the most logical and best move. I saw it, of course, but I thought for some reason, and I didn't have a lot of time, that maybe he could get both pawns for his bishop. So I thought, what if I just go b6 instead? Also a good move, but not the best move, because now the bishop goes to c6, and still my opponent has counterplay. So I took the bishop here, my opponent takes back, attacking also the c5 pawn, and I play queen to c1. Remember, I need to protect the back rank checks as well, and I'm also protecting the c5 square. Here, queen to g4, basically threatening a checkmate, and here I play a brilliant move. f3, brilliant move. It looks like I'm simply giving up a pawn. Well, I am, right? Because you can simply take it because this pawn is pinned and my opponent does take. But do you see an amazing move in this position? Because I need to protect this square, right? And can I activate my queen as well? At the same time, I got rid of the back rank issues, right? Because the f pawn is now gone. Queen to b2, attacking this pawn, and I will take it with a check, right? And also protecting the g2 square. So no checkmate threatened now. My opponent brings the king forward to f6. And now another brilliant move, by far the best move in the position, queen to f2, pinning the bishop to the queen. And here, e4, protecting the bishop. And I cannot really take, because it's still pinned, right? But do you see a brilliant move in this position? The one and only clean finish in this position, knight to e4. I saw this move already up front, because now if you take with the queen, you cannot take with the bishop, right? Because still this pinned. You take the bishop with the check, and the queen simply has to take. Yeah, and this is simply a winning position for white with two passed pawns. So remember these middle game principles and use them in your next game. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you!